I'm Sue Beere, and we came to San Miguel in June of 1971. My husband and our two children, they were 10 and 12. We'd been here before. My mother-in-law and Barry's stepfather lived here, Arthur Zadenberg and Tommy Beere Zadenberg, and we'd visited here. And things happened in New York. Barry was a radio newscaster, and they changed the format, and he lost his job, and it was tough somehow. It was difficult, and then he inherited a little money, not much, and then Tommy called up, and she said, there's a house for sale on Calle Correo, $9,000, and we kind of made up our minds in about 5 minutes, and we came down here. Well, they had always been travelers. They lived in Woodstock, New York, and they had traveled all over the world, really. They were very adventurous. And they'd come down here several times. They told me once they came down when there was no road to Querétaro, and they just kind of went over fields and stuff. And then they decided to build a house here, I guess. Arthur wrote a lot of books. He wrote about 41 books, I think. One of them, Anyone Can Draw, was very popular. Oh, I liked it right away. I had thought up until then that you could only live in New York, how New Yorkers are. But in about a week, I liked it. It was beautiful. And the people were very nice, and everybody was very helpful, and it was all good. And rich and poor didn't matter either very much. It really didn't matter. A typical day, they were all different. Well, everybody knew everyone else, it seemed. It seemed there were lots of parties and lots of people getting together. Well, we had gotten involved with the theater people very, very early. And there were play readings and productions. Barry put on a play, my husband, Steam Bath by Bruce J. Friedman, and that was quite funny. And meanwhile, we were doing play readings, and there was just a lot to do. They were very busy. They were doing, and also they thought they could do anything. We'll do Hamlet. I'll be Hamlet. You'll be, a very appreciative audience too. Just as there is now. I don't think it's changed too much.
How many years were you involved in the theater?
Oh, for almost all the time, up until just recently. I think it all depended on the language. If you could speak fairly good Spanish, or if they could speak fairly good English, that made a big difference.
Did you feel that the relationships between the foreigners and the locals was good?
Yes.
Don't just say yes.
Don't you say yes? Well, later on, when I got to be the editor of Atencion, and we did a piece on relationships between the foreigners and the Mexicans about marriages. And we came to a very obvious conclusion, and that was that a marriage between a Mexican woman and an American man was great. It worked out well. But the opposite, a Mexican man marrying an American, a North American woman, no, it didn't work, usually. As I said that, I thought of a few marriages that really did work. I thought of Augusta Irving, who married the handsome Ramon, and that was a beautiful marriage, and so it did work. And I think maybe American women were too aggressive, maybe, yeah. Yeah, I worked for Atencion. In the beginning, it was all volunteers, but then later it got to be, they had paid people.
And you were actually editor of Atencion at one time.
Well, there were many editors. There were many, it had started it was started by 3 women from New York, Mimi Loomer, her sister Eve Green, and Connie Moore, was that her name? Connie Moore, yeah, in 1975. And the way I got involved was I brought the news, a neighbor died, and I brought the news to the paper. And they said, well, we're very short-handed, you're gonna have to write this up yourself. So I did, and then they said, okay, now do this, and now do this. And I was hooked. It was, even though it was a 12-page paper then, printed on letterpress, it was a newspaper. And
What date was that?
that was around around 87, I think. No, 77. 77. The paper was started in 75. And about the paper, it made money from day one on its advertising. And now when I hear people saying, oh, there's too much advertising in Atencion, I think, well, where do you think the money comes from to pay for the paper? And also, for a long time, I don't know if it's still true, the profits of the paper were half the expenses of running the whole library. My mother came down, and actually I mentioned that we were very short-handed on the paper. For a couple of editions, my mother and I put out the entire paper ourselves.
You were actually editor of Atencion a couple of times, I think.
4 times, actually.
4 times.
The second 2 times I got paid too. Before that, it was nobody got paid, and it was kind of a mean board on the library at that time. And Gert Dickman was the editor, and they weren't happy with her. And so they said they were going to fire her, and we said, well, you can't fire a volunteer. But they said they could, and she said, well, I hope they wait until my 80th birthday. But they didn't. And they also fired Sarita Milos. I forget why. But then Sarita started her own paper, The Independiente, which ran for a couple of years. Remember that? Yeah. Years ago, Virginia Wheelwright, I was talking to Virginia Wheelwright. She and, I've forgotten who it was, started Jóvenes Adelante, and the idea was collect money to help kids who've done well in high school go on to college. It's such a simple idea. And so I joined with them. And since then, we've been going for a long time. And it's more than scholarships. It's each kid has a mentor, and we have English classes, and we even had a psychologist for a while. Well, you know, I knew it was a foreign country, and I knew it was not going to be like the United States, so I expected it. I didn't mind them. One of the real problems in the beginning was the electricity went up and down, and it burned things out. And the telephone was pretty funny. We used to get the radio on our telephone, but that got fixed.
Coming from New York, you must have had everything available.
Yeah, but I didn't compare it. I knew it was different, and I kind of liked it. It was challenging, and it took a lot of, you had to figure things out yourself, you know, and sometimes do them yourself. Matthew needed special education. He was autistic, and so we had a tutor here for a while, and then we found a good school for him in the States. And Valerie went to Augusta's, which was a one-room schoolhouse. And it was good. Augusta signed a contract with each kid.
Oh.
And Valerie really thrived there.
Tell us something about Augusta's school. Was it in her home?
Yeah, it was in her home.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And the children just were crazy about her, I guess.
Well, I think the girls liked her a lot. She didn't really believe in gym or anything like that. And so the boys got a little restless. But she was quite funny and a really good teacher. But she would try anything. She would teach anything that she got her hands on. They're predictable, I think. Of course, many more people, many more cars. I remember when I was editor of the paper, there were 5,000 registered cars. Now I think there are 20,000. So that explains a lot about the traffic and all that, and the population. And I think the people, I think I noticed a certain globalization of people, especially the kids. They dress differently. It used to be very modest, but, and now they've been globalized.
Do you see most of these changes as positive or negative? Certainly the traffic is negative.
The traffic, yeah. Well, I guess inevitable is more what they were. I think the town grew faster than I expected it to. It used to be that when I opened the window back there, it was all barren hills. And now there are eight-story apartment buildings occupied too. And is that good? I don't know. Most people think it's bad. We did some stories on the jail, which at that time was upstairs in the Presidencia overlooking the Jardín. And there were about, maybe 30 prisoners there. They all slept on mats. They had literacy classes and arithmetic classes. And they also knit sweaters. They made these great sweaters with big collars and ankle length. And my daughter and I got them, and mine was too long. And so I brought it back to the guy, and I gave him 5 pesos, and he shortened it. And then it was still too long. And so I brought it back again, and I gave him 5 pesos, and he shortened it again. And he said, for 50 pesos, I could undo the whole sweater. And then once we were in New York, in this kind of fancy store on Madison Avenue, and the owner was just entranced with the sweaters, and he wanted to order a whole bunch, and we thought, no, it's not that kind of business. It was very humane, that jail. Now, of course, the jail is up on the road to Querétaro, and it's more, I think, like a U.S. jail. They even have solitary now. I met Peter. That was when I had just become the editor of the paper. And he came in with a story promoting his intensive photography workshop. And then he let me take his workshop free. It was quite, and I loved it. It was a marvelous course. And we started living together for 16 years, I guess.
And you were widowed.
Oh yeah, Barry, I didn't mention that.
Yeah.
Barry was killed in a car accident the year after we got here.
You came here and you lost your husband after a year, and you had a young girl still in school. What kind of challenges were there for her or for you as a mother at that point in time?
It's a good question. Yeah. We were in it was hard to know how to bring up a young girl. Once I found out that Valerie, who was supposed to be staying with her friend overnight, was actually at a nightclub. A friend of mine told me that. Things like that. There was a little bit of, they were smoking grass at some point. But then, when she was 14, she went to visit a friend of mine in California. And Valerie had always been very good in school. And the friend said, high school is kind of a waste of time. Why don't you try to get into Santa Monica Junior College? So she took the test, and she lied about her age. She went to college. She never went to high school. And I was glad that she wasn't in San Miguel then, because most of her friends, there was nothing after that here at that time. No real high school or anything like that. Protest in San Miguel. The police arrested a young guy who was drunk, and shooting bullets up in the air. And then they shocked him. They gave him electric shocks. Nobody even knew that kind of thing was going on in San Miguel, and he died. This was in 81. And they stormed the Presidencia, but they didn't do any damage. They were just angry and upset that this could happen in San Miguel. And Pedro Jerez was the mayor then. And after they stormed the Presidencia, he had to call in the state police, and they came in with canisters of tear gas, but they didn't set them off. And then everything got quiet.
Huh.
And that was that. And I don't even know if there was any reform among the police. I don't know what happened after that. I think you can't live here without being very moved by the ceremonies that go on at Easter at all the many holidays. And it's something that's kind of survived, the feeling. Well, this was the start of the archive project. Oh, it was actually had been started with money left by Letitia Eklund. She left, I think, $2,000. And Adeline, Medalia, and Fran were carrying it out, and then I joined with them. He did a lot of different things. He actually started a rock group. He was a pretty good musician. He was maybe one of the older rock musicians. They played Mexico City, and then they got a booking, I think, in Palm Springs, California. It's now, the orphanage is now out of town, and I've been there many times. Carmen Masip started the Academia, the language school, and also was director of Bellas Artes. I've forgotten his name, but he was the president of the only bank in town then. Yeah, they made a lot of mistakes in that bank, but it was kind of a pleasant place.